hereby stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please, led by Sharon McQueen. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Special meeting of the Park Board of the City of Connersville, Indiana is now in session. Please turn your cell phone ringers off. Roll call.
Jen Barrett,
Here.
Jeff Cooley,
Here.
Sharon McQueen,
Here.
Scott Kiefaber,
Here.
Vane Lashua,
Here.
and Kirshner.
Here.
Okay. We've gathered for the special meeting tonight to hear from the park superintendent. She has a presentation on her proposal for non-renewal of the Babe Ruth contract with the current Babe Ruth board. She has a proposal for how the Parks and Recreation Department can implement that and stay under the Babe Ruth organization. We will then have a presentation by Jared McLaughlin, the Babe Ruth Board President. We'll have time for the Park Board to ask any questions or any discussion that's needed. We will have a public forum time. We have a 5-minute speaking limit on the public forum, and then we will adjourn. So, Catherine, if you would start.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight and showing interest in this topic. Everybody that's here, as well as everybody that might be watching at home. I've written some things down, so I make sure that I cover the things that I want to cover. And I'm going to start with some background information, because for those of you who don't know me at all, I was raised here in Connersville. I graduated from CHS in 1998 and from Butler University in 2002. Until 2013, I lived in Hamilton County and worked in marketing for a laboratory research company. In 2008, I took my first nonprofit position back at Butler. There I was responsible to identify, match, request, and report on corporate and family foundation grant opportunities with programming across campus. More importantly, I learned how a funding campaign works, how to build collaboration among the right parties, and how to appeal to individual funders' needs. We moved our family back to Connersville almost 6 years ago, and I found a position at the Community Foundation. In this position, I was able to make relationships with the majority of our local nonprofits, learn how they operate, and help them grow through funding and other resources. During my 5 years at the foundation, we had a close relationship with the Parks Department, and we worked together to build the Nickel Plate Trail, and we secured the land for River's Edge Park. We wrote the current 5-year park master plan and received the grant from the DNR to begin construction for Phase 1 at River's Edge. For a short time before taking my current position, I worked in the Rush County Economic Development Office, where my focus was workforce development. I wanted to give this background so that my experience and perspective of what I bring to the job of park superintendent could be better understood. It is my job now to look at our park system not only from the ground level, like making sure the grass gets mowed, but also from a 30,000-foot view, which is better quality of life and community development. In the past 5 years, I would guess I've attended at least 75 community planning meetings, discussions, or development conferences. The message always boils down to the same thing. Rural communities need population growth to prosper. Last week, I heard State Representative Mike Kakarov speak, and he was asked if he had to choose between workforce development and new business, what would he pick? And he chose people. While he admitted it is a sort of chicken and the egg discussion, he would choose population and what brings population to a community. In the case of most rural communities, the answer is quality of life. Quality of life is the new job of superintendents across the country. Parks are no longer expected to be a slide, a swing set, and an acre of grass to mow. Parks are expected to be destination points for tourism, to make quality of life that families don't want to move away from. And in more and more instances, they play integral roles in economic development. Not long ago, I was talking with Mike Bottomley about when he started as the parks superintendent. He told me about his first day on the job and how all he had was a desk over in our current shop. He had no proper office and no secretary. And just since the beginning of when Mike was the superintendent, we've built a new pool. We've built the John Miller Center. We've built soccer fields and managed recreational soccer leagues. And we've assumed the management of recreational basketball. The Miller Center has allowed the park to expand to host events both large and small, as well as other indoor recreational sports. The park now manages a trail committee and maintains existing trail. Since I started in May, we have expanded our summer camp to include fall break and started a new toddler time program. Next summer, the park will offer movies in the park and a concert series as well. Just this week, we began talks of offering a women's recreational basketball league. The park has a long history of showing its ability to offer more and more quality services. The park does this through every administration, adjusting to mayoral decisions about staff and funding. We've proven our ability to continue to succeed, and what we do is in response to community need. In 2015, research began to write the park's 5-year master plan. Public opinion surveys were distributed and public meetings were held. The data collected showed that 70% of citizens were in favor of relocating the baseball fields to River's Edge. In response, the park board identified relocating the baseball fields as a priority. We are now nearing completion of Phase 1 of construction. By the end of the year, the amphitheater, the first concession stand, and the playground will be complete. That research also showed the public wanted walking trails, pickleball courts, concerts, movies, more camp opportunities, new trees planted, and a shelter at Frazee Park. All of these items have or will next year be completed by the park. I mention this because it's been commented to me that the park will not be able to fund the rest of River's Edge. I would say look at our track record. Look at what we have accomplished the last 4 years. I cannot name a comparable park system that has completed the amount of projects completed here in Connersville. A driving reason for the park to manage baseball is the move to River's Edge. Preparation is practical and should make common sense. There are many practical questions that I have been asked about my recommendation. I've provided my board with detailed information, but I will try to cover those topics in general. The first one is that the park is trying to end Babe Ruth baseball in Connersville. This is not true. Babe Ruth is a national organization with which different community entities can charter. The charter allows a community to carry insurance if it needs it, and it allows entry into Babe Ruth-sponsored tournaments. National Babe Ruth has no regulation, right, or other say-so in how a community runs its recreational baseball programs. Right now, the park leases its baseball facility to a group of volunteers called the Babe Ruth Board. But recreational baseball leagues have no direct consequence with National Babe Ruth. To my knowledge, there have been no local teams entered into a Babe Ruth-sponsored tournament in recent years. I have recommended to the park board that it not renew the current Babe Ruth Board's lease. which would allow the park to manage baseball leagues. The park will continue to charter with Babe Ruth. We will provide the opportunity for local teams to enter into Babe Ruth tournaments. To change the charter is as simple as the current board providing me the login information to the website. We may change insurances if the city can offer us a better deal, which I will investigate should my proposal be accepted. What can the public expect, and what is the park planning to change? Very little will change for the public. The park will offer the same leagues and follow a similar timeline in its first year. The park will reduce the cost of registration from $55 to $40 per child. We also plan to offer weekend games. Now the public will be able to work with one organization instead of two. Another question I've been asked is why now? Why not wait until River's Edge is built or until construction is started? My answer to that is why not now? So often groups are criticized for not preparing enough for change, and I am hearing criticism for beginning too soon. The decision for the park to manage baseball makes practical sense with or without the construction of River's Edge. I'd like everybody to kind of think about your own job, and I'm going to use an example of a school because that's pretty relatable for most people. So say a new superintendent comes into the school system and interviews the principals. And at one school, the principal outsources the second grade. And the superintendent says, "Why do you outsource the second grade? Do you not have the staff?" And the principal says, "Yes, we have the staff." "Well, do you not have the facility?" And the principal says, "Sure, we have the facility, but we rent it out to a third party to teach the second grade." "Well, do you not have the expertise to teach the second grade?" And the principal says, "Well, sure, we have the expertise." This is the situation that the park is in. We have the facility, we have the expertise, we have the staff, we have the funding. There's no reason to use a third party to run the baseball leagues. I won't spend time on this at all, but we are aware of past issues with the Babe Ruth Board. I feel that the park can offer the personnel and the financial stability that the current board cannot offer. I've been asked, how am I going to staff and how am I going to pay to run baseball? I've presented that in a lot of detail to my board. In short, I'm going to reorganize the seasonal staff that I can hire. I will use income from registrations, sponsorships, and concessions to fund other items. I will not be increasing my staff budget. I will not be using more tax dollars. Most importantly, I've been told that I am cutting out the current board and they will no longer have any way to participate with baseball. This is not true either. The park does plan to form a smaller baseball committee. Those people who are interested in the committee from the entire community will be able to apply. The park always has and always will welcome volunteers. Anyone is welcome to volunteer at our baseball fields. Tonight is not a conversation about the current Babe Ruth board doing something wrong. I'm not evaluating individuals. I am evaluating the efficiency of managing a third party running a park facility versus bringing it under the Parks Department. I have determined that consolidating and managing recreational baseball under the park makes more practical sense. I mentioned before that I've attended a great many community planning conversations. From these meetings, I realize that change is difficult and is not always well received. I do not pretend to think that any reasoning I present will outweigh personal emotions. I recognize the tradition and the history of the Babe Ruth Board, and I know that this arrangement has worked for many years. I give much credit to all the volunteers who filled this gap in our community when the park did not have the resources. However, I don't agree that attachment to what once was or how things used to be is a reason to make the same decision over and over again. I did not make my recommendation lightly or without thorough research. My recommendation comes from logical comparison. The park can offer full-time, dedicated staffing as opposed to the extra time of volunteers who work their own jobs and have their own commitments. Financially, the park would be held accountable to the city clerk, who is held accountable to the State Board of Accounts, instead of a volunteer managing a separate bank account. From a management standpoint, the superintendent, whether it's me or someone else, will have less people to manage, fewer meetings to attend. The sports director will be able to better schedule games and manage fields. Sponsorship requests and funding decisions will be centralized. The entire system will be streamlined. The Parks Department currently manages and maintains 150 acres over 8 parks, an aquatic center, 2 horse barns, and more than 15 unique child and adult programs. We host 3 annual events that are attended by thousands of local residents. The park is completely capable, ready, and excited to manage baseball. No one wants change just for the sake of change, but sometimes change makes sense, and this is one of those times. I have found no logical obstacle to making this change, and I recommend that the park board votes to end the current lease on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Jared?
My name is Jared McLaughlin. I'm the current board president of Connersville Babe Ruth. We would like to go with the current lease the following year. We'd like to maintain that. I don't have the type of presentation she has. Mine was more of a question and answer. But I know we mentioned I have public opinion, 5 minutes to have around. Part of my presentation is also Michael Thompson. I would like to give way to him before I finish mine, if that's possible.
Yes, that's fine.
All right, Michael.
I'm Mike Thompson. I'm the high school baseball coach, and it concerns me because I'm concerned about the baseball side. You know, as far as the parks taking over, the accountability and the management, I don't really care who's running it. I care about the baseball side of it. And so I have some concerns. I've been involved now for just over a year and a half, and I feel like we've made a lot of progress with our current board. We've made a lot of changes. We have proposed some upcoming changes that I think will help the baseball side of things the following year. And I'm concerned right now, is that going to be hindered? You know, in any way, shape, or form that we hinder any progress with my feeder program, that's going to hurt our baseball program at the high school level. I'm concerned, could it become a travel league? If it becomes a travel league, then it's not going to help the high school program whatsoever. Currently, the softball program is based on travel teams. and they barely have enough for one team last year at the high school level. That concerns me. I'm concerned right now because our JV and our middle school program use the Babe Ruth facility because we have one field for 3 teams. Is that still going to be allowed for us to be able to use the field down there as well? I'm concerned that there could be any personal agendas. I've been told to my face that hope I fail. What better way to help me fail than to hinder my feeder program at that level? Those are concerns I have. I'm concerned about maintenance. I know Catherine expressed you'll have the staff to be able to take care of the fields. You know, if it rains a little bit on Saturday or on an afternoon, are we going to have enough people down there to get the fields ready? Does the staff care to take the time to get the field ready? I've been through soccer for over 10 years. I know there was plenty of times that parents showed up to mow the grass at the soccer field because they weren't taken care of, not ready to be played on. Those things concern me. Again, if the Parks Board takes over, I think it can work. I think it can be a good thing, but I think Catherine mentioned having a small baseball committee and an advisory board. I think that is absolutely has to be done. I think I need to be involved with that advisory committee. I think I should have almost a final say who's on there, because I want people that are concerned about the baseball side of things. Who runs concessions, who schedules games, those types of things, I don't care. You know, but I'm concerned about the rules that we have, making sure that we're providing the best opportunities for our kids at that level, because like I said, it's our feeder program. Currently, you are in charge of softball, boys and girls soccer, and boys and girls basketball. And how many high school coaches are involved in those programs? Me. And I was involved with the girls basketball program for all those years as well. You know, and I'm not saying there's not any others, you know, that may or may not be in it, but I want to be involved because it means something to me in the end. So, like I said, I think it could be a good thing. It really can, but I think we have to work together. Put aside any personal agendas at all and just making sure that we're making the best decision for, you know, the baseball kids. And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, I'm gonna ask you guys questions. Is that okay now? Fair
It's
enough.
up to Jim.
Jen?
That, before you ask questions, do you want to address any of Michael's concerns?
All right, ahead.
Sure. I think our interlocal agreement with the school system would completely cover you as far as field usage goes. You would just be working with Dennis on when to schedule those times. The park board can relay that your name is in my document, that you would be part. I can't force you to be part of it. So I said you would be either directly involved or involved in an advisory capacity, but that would be up to you, how you wanted to be involved. I don't foresee this hurting your feeder program in any way. It would just be working with Dennis instead of working with Jared. Nobody wants to make baseball a travel league. That's a new one to me. And as far as maintenance goes, I mean, this is going to be 4 people's jobs is going to be maintaining these fields. So it's not going to be, I have got a couple hours here or there. It's when you clock in and clock out, that's where you go and what you do.
Like I said, those are just concerns I have.
Sure.
Things that I want to make sure that we address.
Yeah,
Mike is involved as a soccer coach. I talked to Carrie Brown 4 or 6 weeks ago about getting more involved with basketball. Dennis has some great ideas about involving coaches more, especially with our rec league coaches. That's something on our agenda as well. I don't see any reason why we can't work with you at all.
That's just what I asked.
Sure. So does that answer your questions, or do you have other
No, I
concerns?
think that's good.
I'm going to read the part of her on her proposal about the advisory committee, so that you understand that she has covered each of those things in there. It states that managing the baseball program would be incorporated into the sports director role with the addition of adding an advisory It says board right now, but we may be changing that word to committee. Babe Ruth League requires some type of board with at least a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, with people being allowed to serve in multiple roles. We would envision the sports director serving as the president, and the superintendent would be listed as the treasurer, as the city clerk would be handling all the finances. Up to 4 other volunteers would be selected by the park for the board. So not necessarily us, but by at least the superintendent, with 2 of those assuming the roles of vice president and secretary. The park would advertise for applications or resumes, so anybody from the community can apply for those positions.
But you would not have to apply.
Right, right. The park secretary could also serve as the secretary if needed, as Erica does for our board. The current middle and high school baseball coaches would be invited to be part of the board in an active or advisory capacity. So they could serve on the board, like in a role, or just as advisors.
And that would be up to you, what your commitment would want to be.
Right.
And responsibilities of the advisory board members would include managing umpires, input on game scheduling, input on game and draft rules, handling parent and coach questions, helping with fields and volunteers, and fundraising.
Good. All right. This past season, before we started the whole thing, I finally set out to grow the program. And preparing for that was immense. But I relied on the Aspen Institute. Do you guys know what the Aspen Institute is? Okay. Sorry. I won't give you background, but you can look it up later. For advice. One of the recommendations was to ask children before their season started if they were having fun. Preseason and postseason. And when I asked if they were having fun, they said yes. So I elaborated, I'm like, okay, what was fun about it? Number one thing they would bring up was friends. Second one was coaching. Third was actually snow cones. I never even heard the word winning. And that was something that surprised me. But the parents, on the other hand, winning was the number one goal for their child. And a lot of kids kind of felt pressure from their parents. So my question to you, and I try to do this problem and solve it a little bit, and I'll give you a little more background. I learned that we need to have more coaches that don't have children in the league and allow for some unstructured play by teaching fundamentals. That was one of the main reasons I chose not to coach and allow my children to be coached by somebody else this year. So what will you be doing to enhance children's passion for the game?
I think that's something that Mike actually brought up when we talked, was about stopping a game and allowing for instruction.
That's a change that I would like to promote.
Yeah.
If we can get longer conversation, but
Right.
yeah, I want to work in drill work
Yeah.
before the game is played.
Fundamentals.
So fundamentals are being taught, because once the season starts, I know there's no time for practice.
Right.
Now they pretty much don't practice, so it'd be a mandatory.
Yeah.
That 2 teams are playing each other, they do drill work together, fundamental work, both teams together, then go play the game.
And I really liked that idea. I think it will take a lot of education for parents to understand that game change, because they're used to coming and seeing one team pummel another team, or, it be a very competitive game. So I think a lot of education will have to be put forth. I think as a Parks Department, our first priority is to provide the best recreational league we can. Recreation does not equate winning. Recreation is not competitive. It is not my goal to run a competitive league for little kids. So if I totally agree with your direction, and I would be completely supportive to continue that.
Okay.
Read the sign down at the field.
Yep.
Just read it, people.
It's
I
true.
mean, there's nobody
They're just
getting a
kids.
major league contract today.
Yeah, they're just
Yeah,
kids.
they're just kids.
Okay. Okay, with the non-lease renewal possibility occurring for the 2020 season, and most of the funds I'm gonna ask, are most of the funds being directed towards River's Edge project, the income from the program?
Part of my timeline, the first thing I would do if this is moved over to the park is in December and January is to evaluate the facilities down at the current fields, evaluate the concession stand, the restrooms, and all that stuff, and decide how much do we want to put into this, you know, for the next couple of years. But yes, my main goal is to move the ball fields. I don't want to be in a floodplain anymore. The community doesn't want to be in a floodplain anymore. That's why I kind of went through the history of the master plan, was because this isn't something that the Parks Department dreamed up. It's something that the community said that they wanted, and we are executing it for the community.
Okay. All right. Appreciate that answer. Thank you very much. And the final question I have, I know that we've talked about hosting tournaments for the community to generate funds for the project. But I know you mentioned studies earlier. What type of studies have been commissioned to determine the potential revenue versus the ROI? And what type of sport will generate most income? Because sometimes I know when they do studies for facilities that you want to build, like pickleball courts and everything else, and what needs to be in place first before it succeeds.
Well, I think in this instant, our driving force was not ROI, it was community demand. The community wants their baseball fields moved out of a floodplain. They want to be able to host tournaments in our town that aren't canceled or never committed to because of our location. My goal with, when I say host tournaments this summer, I'm not talking about giant tournaments. I'm talking about getting Centerville and Rushville and, you know, Batesville up here to have a tournament. I'm not talking about, you know, a huge money maker right now. Now, when we move out to River's Edge, that facility will be used for tournaments, and we are working on a municipal sports complex business plan, and I'm working on that with our architects and with the attorneys that they've connected me with.
Okay.
I don't have that with me tonight, but it's on the horizon. That's what the facility, you know, it will have.
All right, I won't keep you much longer because I know there's people have other questions and it's already 7:30. I know we'll be here quite a while. Do you have questions for me?
My question's on your profit and loss statement.
Okay.
Actually going back, because I had the copy that was provided for 2018. So at the end of the year, there was still a balance of $12,000. $12,904 at the end of 2018. So does that money roll over to the next year?
It does roll over to the next year, but we also have expenses in between. What date is that statement?
It's February.
Okay, so that would have included signups from January, February, and sponsors
Okay.
show.
So the last date on this transaction history is December 18th, 2018, and it says balance $7,739.
That
So
would be
that was the
correct.
end of the
Yes.
year. So that would have been the balance at the end of the year
Yes.
for 2018. So then that money rolls over to 2019.
Yes.
So I'm not seeing your current balance. I mean, I have a lot of numbers here, but I don't see what,
I
because
just
your
gave you-
season's done.
Yeah, I gave the
So-
profit and loss of actual rundown of what occurred, whatever happened. I did not bring the bank statement with me. I can provide that for Monday's meeting.
Basically, my question is, at the end of the year,
Mhm.
after you've paid your
Fees.
concessions, your umpire, field material, uniforms, and trophies, you are still retaining a profit.
Part of
at
it,
the end of the
yes.
year.
This year, though, I believe we're at $2,500. $2,500 to $2,700. I haven't
Okay.
looked at
Okay.
it.
And so then you just use, so then that rolls over
That
to
rolls
the
over.
next year.
Correct.
It's more money than they used to have.
I know,
Lots more money than they used to have.
I've seen years where there's no money or there's $2.
Mm-hmm. It only takes $1 to keep the account open.
That's right.
Been there.
So in the wages and salaries, that's separate from the umpires.
Correct.
Is that just
Every-
your concession workers?
It's concession workers, that will include grounds. That's between those two areas where you spend the most money.
So you
As
pay
board-
wages for your grounds?
As board president, I do not receive any money. Never have.
No, but no board president has ever received any money. No, nobody that served on the Babe Ruth board has ever received any money.
Correct. You do pay your concessions, you pay your grounds, make sure everything's good.
Yeah.
When do you set your budget?
Actually, we
What-
set our
when do you-
budget right in December, try to make sure it's all set, but at this point, we kind of haven't got to that. For 2020.
So the prior period on here was all of 2018 and the current period is for 2019.
Yes. Spent a lot going into this season, getting senior field ready, redoing things.
Minor
So-
A, minor B.
Absolutely.
Lots of work on the minor A and minor B fields.
I know we started the season in April with the middle school, so we had to be ready way before then.
Yeah.
We were out there mowing in February, pulling grass off. So,
So at this time, you're almost breaking even each year.
Which is big from where they were a few years ago.
correct. Any questions?
I have, and I'm gonna make a comment because I'm about ready to burst, to be quite frank. I've been involved with the Babe Ruth organization since 1987. I have been the gate person for every tournament that we have hosted, -2, since 1985. My kids started in T-ball and they went all the way through. I'm the person that they see when they first come into the park. And I've been there for a really long time, and as a result, clearly I have a vested interest in the Babe Ruth program because I have seen it from when my children, who now have children, my grandchildren are now in there. My issue with this Parks Department taking over is I have real difficulty that the Parks Department fully understands the scope of the efforts that it takes to run a successful program. It's just that, and it's not a put down, it's just simply having been involved with it for so many years and knowing how much volunteer time it takes and the dedication of the people. I'm with Michael, I have no problem about the finances and that kind of stuff. But I'm concerned about the baseball and the kids, because we want to build a good feeder program. We almost lost Babe Ruth baseball a few years ago to traveling teams. People and coaches that had their kids in Babe Ruth here left. They were playing for the Richmond River Rats and God knows where else. The numbers were incredibly small. And it was awful. It broke my heart to see that few kids and they're going over to the other places. The dedication of the people who recognized those problems and worked so hard over the last few years to get our numbers back up again. Certainly we have travel ball, but that's outside, that's a different kind of thing. I'm just so concerned. Everybody here, I think, wants the best for the kids. I think the issue is how we attain that goal, how we work together to attain that goal. I think the Parks Department has a lot to offer, okay? I had Babe Ruth in my living room for 6 years, quite literally for 6 years. And I was intensely involved for very, very many years in a very active role. So I know how much time and how much work it takes. And I just really don't know that the governmental agency understands exactly how much work is going to go into it. And an advisory board of just a few people, I don't know. I have some serious, serious concerns. And I have some serious concerns about some people, frankly, that will just get mad and say, okay, the parks are taken over. I'm not going to have my kid pay. And I'm not saying that that's right, but I'm saying it's human. It's simply human. Government's taking over previously privately run things is not popular. Period. No matter what that is. And I think we have to be very careful as adults to keep our stuff out of it. And look at the kids. Look at the kids. The little ones are a riot. And they're learning and they're having a good time. We need the volunteers. When a grandma does the book for her grandson's minor A team because nobody else will do it, my grandma knows how to do it. They were right. I did know how to do it because I've done it for 30 years. We need those kinds of volunteers. And what I'm really concerned about is that as a governmental agency, we have a huge responsibility, okay? But I think we have to temper that a little bit with tradition and with the needs of the community. And how this is going to impact our kids. You know, are the parents going to get mad and pull their kids out and say travel ball? Catherine brought up, Batesville, Rushville, those people all come, but they come to Babe Ruth sponsored tournaments. There's a coach in Batesville that coaches kids now. I remember when he played.
When was our last Babe Ruth sponsored tournament?
2 years ago, when we had the flood. 2 years ago when we had the flood. But the floods, and before that time.
When's the last time we sent a local team to a tournament?
We were sending one to Edmondsville this past year.
Yeah.
15.
15.
We've sent teams over the past few years. The traveling teams go. We have quite a few of the traveling teams that go, but we've sent teams to those things. And again, that kind of goes by the talent and by the parents and what they want to do, because traveling for Babe Ruth tournaments is a pain. I did it for 5 years. And it's expensive and there's a lot of time involved. And sometimes the parents just don't want to do that for a variety of reasons. So they don't get it organized. We don't have an all-star team. Okay? I think part of the problem is that back in the day, we had some really, really, really good teams. The 93 team that won the Babe Ruth World Series, those guys are all 40 now. Or almost. That's a little scary. Makes me older than I care to be. But I think we had a tradition that was being built. We hosted the Babe Ruth World Series back in the early 2000s. It fell on hard times. That happens to everybody. But I think this is, personally, I just think this is such a radical change. And people don't adapt to radical change well. And I'm just very concerned that something like this, and I've expressed it to Catherine, I'm very concerned that this could impact our baseball program in a very negative way if it's not handled very carefully. And I have serious concerns that the Parks Department just doesn't understand the scope of what it takes to do this and all the volunteers that are necessary and working together to make it a viable program. And that's not a put down to the people at the Parks Department. It's just an awful lot of work and an awful lot of time and an awful lot of hours. But the benefit is great because of who benefits are our kids. The 8-year-olds that walk off the field and say, "Did I win? I had a good time and I learned, I made a double play. Cool, That's what we're here for. And I just hate to see anything that could possibly take that away. And I think Jared is quite right in the sense that under his administration, they've really worked hard at making it fun for the kids. Really worked hard at making it fun for the kids. And that's what it needs to be. And that's what I'm direly afraid may go away if the Parks Department, if we're not very careful in how we do this and act as adults in the best interest of children rather than the adversarial situation which exists currently. And I'll admit, I'm part of that. I was not in favor, I'm still probably not in favor, but I'm hopeful that both sides can reach some sort of compromise for the benefit of everybody. You know, the baseball side of it gets what they need, the kids get what they need, and the financial side gets what it needs. And it's the adults that are gonna make the decisions, but it's the kids that are gonna pay. And that's tough.
Thank you. I'm going to open up to public forum. Anybody would like to speak? You may come up.
Hi, my name is Julie Bell, and I am a school counselor at the high school. I'm one of the current board members with Babe Ruth right now, and one of the concerns that I have is, I guess it's a question for you, Catherine. What will be done with the fields once we move to the river's edge?
Sorry, I was trying to start your timer. Previously, the discussion had been to turn those over to the utilities department. Is that still the plan, Mike, as far as you know?
The last.
That was the kind of the last time it was discussed.
Can you elaborate on that? Like, what does that mean? Like, they would,
We have sewer, water lines cutting through there, and also we have wells that probably need to be secured a little better than what they are. Plus it's a floodplain. We don't plan on building nothing on it, but pretty much isolate it and use it as a floodplain.
Yeah, the other conversations that we've had, since it is city property, if you choose to put anything else, then you still have the same problems of it flooding and so you still have the maintenance and everything like that.
I'm just concerned that we are not going to maintain those fields because it is very difficult to find fields to practice on to teach the youth the fundamentals, especially once season starts, because all the fields are used for games. It's a huge problem, and that's just one of my main concerns is how many fields will be at River's Edge?
There'll be 7.
7. And I'm pretty sure that most of them will be in use for games, and it will
Well,
be.
that's another advantage as well, is because we also have industrial field that
One.
can be used as a practice field.
Is that correct? It's 1?
Yeah, but it's still
It's one.
it's still one.
It's 1,
I can't make the land at River's Edge any bigger.
right? But we could maintain what we have already. That's my concern.
Oh, so your question is why don't we keep the fields where
Why
they
don't
are
we
as
just
practice
do both
fields?
of them?
Oh, I've never thought about it like that. That's a good point.
If this is something that moves forward, I highly suggest that we do that to just allow more
For more practice area.
practice time. for
Yeah,
students.
that's a great point. It's something we could think about. I don't know how that would work with the wells and stuff like that. We've also had some talks, and I don't want to stir anything else up tonight, but we have talked about utilizing some other park property for some practice fields too. We get it. There's not enough room to practice. It's like what Mike was saying about how, gosh, we have to practically incorporate practice and learning and skills time into a game. And it'd be great if we could have all that time and then have time for a competitive game.
Right.
So, but again, I feel that having centralized management would allow us to coordinate and schedule those fields better, so people are able to practice and play as much as they can.
One of the other things that, the most important thing is community participation. And regardless of whether it's a standalone entity that works on the parks fields, or whether it's part of the parks it's still an entity that's gonna have to be maintained with volunteers. Who's gonna help practice? Who's gonna organize the competition? You still have to have that group do that. I mean, if you're a pickleball or a tennis or a whatever, it's still, that group is gonna do it. And the park, I think, offers a wonderful opportunity to have a maintained environment all along, regardless of what the entity does. Meanwhile, the most important thing, as you said, is a participation by the children and the volunteers who help, whether it's parents or other volunteers who help to coach, focus participation. It's still an entity that exists that's going to need volunteers, regardless of whether it's standalone or whether it's using the facilities and the maintenance and the supervision of the park to keep it going. And I think that I played Little League Babe Ruth, and it was all parents and volunteers, you know, and we played down there in the park, and we didn't practice, or we did practice, but we might have used the junior high field or the, you know, whatever, to be on. That was 50 years ago, 7 years ago, 60 years ago. But meanwhile, I think the most important part is to get community involved. And I think one of the advantages of the parks is that we can communicate the idea that it's there and you can use it, and if it's for your children and you, take advantage of it. It's here, and it's maintained by the city of Connersville. And
It's maintained by the taxpayers in Connersville, not the city.
Well,
And that's one of the things that bothers me about this whole thing, is when you say we
Wait,
and
I'm
the
sorry.
city of Connersville.
If you want to speak, you can
I
come
will
up
give
to the
my
podium and
name then.
speak. Introduce yourself, please.
but right now, it's a self-maintaining thing. The finances are all included, and we're in fact reducing those.
Any government entity is funded by taxpayer dollars, correct?
Sure.
Any government entity. This board, sorry, I'm Andy Beckman, I think most of you know me. I've been on the Babe Ruth board for about, I think this is my 15th year. And I guess I've been sitting back there for the last almost an hour and trying to decide, since I only have 5 minutes, because I mean, we're supposed to be here for the taxpayers of this community, and 5 minutes is not nearly enough time for anybody to speak, to say everything they need to say. Do I take I feel like that this board has done a great job making strides, you know, compared to years past. Do I take that angle, or do I take the taxpayer angle? And from a taxpayer perspective, anytime you involve any government entity, and like it or not, the Parks Department is a government entity. We would all agree on that, right? So at some point, there's cost overruns. You're going to have to pay help. You have to pay. It's union labor, so you're at the mercy of the union. You don't know. These people decide they don't want to show up for work. They just don't have to show up for work. They take sick day, and you have to get fields ready by 5:30, and the guy that's supposed to be there to get the fields ready, he calls in sick.
What about the volunteers?
Our
May I
volunteers.
stop you right there? Because seasonal staff has nothing to do with the union.
But they can still call in sick.
Well, so can you. You can just not
But
show
we
up
don't
too.
do that. If we have somebody that isn't gonna be able to get there to get a field ready, then I'll call Jared and say,
So
hey,
I'll call the
man.
next employee on the list.
And what if he calls in sick?
And what if you're I mean, it's the same.
Not really. No, it's not.
Okay.
And from a taxpayer perspective, it bothers me to see these little nameplates here knowing that I paid for those for what? I mean, we know all you people. Why do we have to use taxpayer dollars for that? That's my thing is when we start turning stuff over to government entities, the taxpayers are going to pay in the end, no matter what. I mean, you can say whatever you want. We're going to finance it with concessions or, you know, sign-up fees or whatever, you know, sponsorships. We can say that, but there's going to be some taxpayer money involved.
But what Catherine is actually proposing here is, instead of the $55 fee for the children to play, she's proposing a $40 fee. And I kind of think that with the state of our economy and where our children are in this town
So-
right now, reducing the cost could actually increase the possibility that you have more kids play.
And it may. But that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is anytime you have the opportunity to take something away from any government entity, whether it be the Parks Department, whatever entity it is, you need to allow a private board or a private company to run that facility or whatever. Your best thing to do is to give those fields to the Babe Ruth Board and let them run the whole thing.
Give or sell?
So,
Either one. I mean, you can sell it to us. I mean, that's my thing is, my whole, I guess, shtick is just, we don't need more government control over things. Because when you involve government control, then it becomes nepotism, cronyism, and you can say it's not or whatever, you can say it's gonna be, whatever. But Catherine actually used the word control in one of the meetings we had with her, and it just, those kinds of things just bother me. That we have, a few people that, just one certain group that are involved in the government, and I'm sure our newly elected Republican mayor would agree, that limited government is the best government. Would you agree?
Sure.
No matter what it is, whether it's a parks board or the federal government, any government at any level, limited is better.
Participatory government is better.
Well, but whenever you can take something away from the government and run it with a voluntary board or with a for-profit entity or a nonprofit entity.
We get paid huge amounts to be on this board.
I'm not saying that doesn't matter. The amount doesn't matter. It's still taxpayer money. The amount doesn't make any difference.
Zero, it's zero.
Well, you guys don't.
There's no taxpayer money there.
You guys don't.
No.
But the park superintendent does. And all those part-time employees will.
You're at
And all of
15
those union
seconds.
employees.
They already are employed. That's the thing.
Not the people she's planning to add, right? You're planning to add, what, 3, 4 part-time employees?
One.
Wait,
That's
so
not-
are you finished? Because I don't want to cut you off, but
Yeah.
I would like to address the issues that have been brought up about taxes. Right now, with the Babe Ruth Board managing the leagues, taxpayer dollars already turn your lights on, they flush your toilets, they run your water.
And that's.
And my union employees that you have so readily criticized mow and fix the facility. Right now, I have 10 seasonal staff that are already in my budget. My proposal is to move those 10 positions around and reorganize those positions. I will not be hiring additional seasonal staff. I will not be using additional taxpayer dollars. I will be reorganizing the budget that I have that already supports your board.
Well, and I guess that brings me back to the best thing for this board to do is either donate that facility or sell it, whatever, to the Babe Ruth Board, to our nonprofit, and get it completely out of the Parks Department's hands.
Well, what
Then
you're
you're gonna be
proposing
paying
is a
the water
totally
bill and
different
the
thing
sewer
than
bill.
what we're discussing.
And not really. I mean, then that's fine. I mean, if that's what it comes to, that's what it comes to.
I mean, my estimate's at maybe $1,000 a month down there just at the ball field
For the
for
water
the
bill?
water bill.
I don't know that.
The entire part, I mean, the entire parks, every month, we pay anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000 on
For
our.
the entire Parks Department.
Yes,
All right, so we need to look into what the
but
water bill is.
they're all separate meters.
Because that
Yeah.
seems a little out there. All right, if my 5 minutes are up, I'll gladly take a seat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
guys.
My name is Dana McLaughlin. I am a board member, at-large board member for the Connersville Babe Ruth Board. This past year, I was the player agent for our whole entire league. First off, I want to start by, and we're probably gonna have to be in the
him back into the conversation about the storm drains down at the ballpark, because they were covered this year. If we're not moving to River's Edge until 3 years from now, how is that water, when it does flood, going to be removed off of the fields?
I have
If
some
there's no
notes
storm
about that
drains.
actually I'm looking for. Mike, can you speak to that while I look for my notes from Brad?
Oh lordy, yeah, like I said before, there's a sewer line that cuts down through Babe Ruth. Takes the
here they are.
bathrooms down there, and a lot of the sewer up road, Houslers and all that, cuts down through, goes to a lift station at Water Street. When it floods, I don't need to tell you where the sewer goes into. Okay,
Right.
we can't do that. IDM does not allow that. We have to close those drains. So this next long-term control plan that we're working on and plans is to shut those drains down so sewer does not go into the river. So that's just step one. There's a lot more work up on top of the hill, but that's one of the simple moves. And that's another reason why when they do move the baseball complex out south, we really don't need those bathrooms open either, because they're open when it floods. And it,
Okay, so I grasped that part as far as the engineering side of it.
yeah,
But like I said, when the ballparks flood, the water is gonna stand down there a lot longer, given those drains are not there now.
right.
So, in the past, it has affected Babe Ruth. It's gonna affect them the same way if the Parks Department takes it over. So what is the plan for you to be able to remove the water off the fields that we have not already done?
Brad has suggested running a line to the river. Does that make sense?
Which would work when the flood recedes.
Yeah. Yeah,
That water sits back there. I mean, most of it flows out, and that water will sit in that corner. It doesn't sit on the
Yeah,
fields.
Jared had contacted me back in August, and I had spoken to Brad about this. The drains were closed because they were overflowing, and they caused the lift station to close for 2 days.
We have to shut down the lift station, or more flow will go into the river.
Right, and which,
So-
like I said, from an engineering side of it, I understand that. I'm just
Right.
wanting to know, how are you going to move? Because
For the next couple of years.
for the next couple of years, how are you gonna, you know what I mean, move the water? Because even once the water starts to recede, yeah, it may be off the infields, but it's still in the outfields. So how are you gonna get it out of there?
Those drains don't take those outfield. It rolls to the corners and sits. I've been down there 15, I was president of the league for a year, on the board for 15 years, I know how it floods. It's not a good situation because of mosquitoes, and that's something maybe we can take a look at with the additional drain. But it does flow out fairly quick when it comes in. It is a lot of hard work down there. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Andy. He's been down there 15 years, and I know why he's so passionate, because he's put blood and sweat down there, and he's down there every year. You can always rely on him. So I understand where he's coming from and have a lot of respect for him. And so it is a tough decision tonight for you guys, but I think sooner or later, Park will have to run that complex out there to organize it, to use it fully. But the water standing is something we're gonna have to look at next time it floods, and maybe we do need to add a drain that goes to the river to get that water out of it, but we cannot use the lift station at this point in time.
Next, Vane, you mentioned a maintained environment by the Parks Department being in charge and taking over everything. With that being said, a maintained environment, there was multiple occasions this past season that the Parks Department softball and t-ball used the Babe Ruth leased fields for their games because they were not able to maintain that environment on their own field. So can you please elaborate how they're gonna be able to continue to maintain environment on more fields when they couldn't do it on one field?
Dennis, do you want to speak to that since you're our sports director? I don't think it's fair to ask Vane expertise on something that's not.
Oh, my fiance's great-grandchildren played the T-ball league and just loved it at every game down there.
There were a couple of
And that's
occasions
part.
where we moved the softball games over to the I'm sorry, I don't know, the minor
Minor
B,
A.
minor
yeah,
A.
Minor A and B.
Yeah,
Right.
because at that point, it wasn't just the field, it was a matter of scheduling. And, I mean, you can work in your rain dates on your schedule, but if you have multiple rain dates for the entire month of June, then we were able to run the softball games on the other fields.
I'm well aware of the rain out dates, because my youngest played T-ball this year. So I'm well aware of the rain out dates on that, but that's what I'm asking, if maintaining an environment means maintaining a schedule and, the maintenance of a field, you're going from one field to
Yes,
more fields.
but if one field is already dry and your field is not dry, then you're gonna play on the dry field. So
Right,
that you
just
can
say
play
there's
the
a
games.
game already scheduled to
But
play.
it wasn't, but I feel like Dennis and Jared have worked well together on using all of the fields.
Right, and I
And-
agree, that's why I'm just
And
asking.
really, we can
how-
use the fields the park leagues can use the fields at any time, and it was never a conflict with the Babe Ruth. There was never a time that baseball was down there trying to use the fields when we wanted the field, so I don't
I never said
understand.
that it was a conflict of our schedules, what I'm asking is a maintained environment. Are you going to, is the Parks Department going to be able to maintain more than one field when it wasn't capable of being maintained for one field? That's what I'm asking.
It's the scope. It's the scope of the job, it's the scope that it takes to get the job done, to keep the fields intact, to keep the program running.
Right.
And the scope is huge to do that. And I think, isn't your question, with the limited number of people involved in the maintenance or from what's proposed, how do they do that job?
Right, I mean, and I get, you only have one field now, and if you're not planning on adding any members, but you're gonna repurpose your seasonal help, how are they gonna do more than one field? By not adding more numbers, not adding more employees.
I have complete confidence that we'll be able to either rearrange what games are played on what fields if we get a flood, rearrange the schedule. If we need to get volunteers, we will.
Okay.
If you guys want to come out and volunteer, that would be wonderful. But to say that we are incapable of doing something,
I'm not
Be-
necessarily saying you're
because the
incapable.
T-ball
I'm
field
asking
got
you
rained
how-
out.
How are you going to manage
It's
this
not
by
logical.
not adding more staff members?
well, I actually am, because I'm pulling more people over to field maintenance.
And
I'm not
Right, but
adding
you didn't
people to my,
explain that.
well, then I apologize. I'm not adding people to my seasonal staff, but I'm pulling people over to field who used to work for general maintenance, like mowing the parks and weed eating and those types of things. So there
Then
will
that
be
makes
staff,
sense.
yes, there will be more staff added to the field side, so if that wasn't clear, I'm sorry.
Okay. And then you discussed, going through the buildings down there, the concession stands, the bathrooms, and evaluating the condition they're in to see what kind of, if you need to make any improvements, spend any money. I understand the Babe Ruth leases the property
Mhm.
for our season, but when it boils down to it, the Parks Department, the city still owns the property, still owns the building. Okay, so when we've had issues with the air conditioner freezing up, the city owns it, but we pay to fix it. When,
No one told me the air conditioner was frozen up this year.
I'm not saying necessarily, I think we made it through okay this year without having to have it redone, but in the years past, I know it's frozen up.
Well,
Because
then
I
it
worked
should have been
concessions.
reported to the superintendent.
From what my knowledge it was, but that's here nor there. But when we have issues with plumbing or issues with anything maintenance-wise down there, we have to call to have somebody from the city come to handle that situation. it may be a thing that, like, it needs to be addressed now, but we don't get that. So if you're going to evaluate it now, why haven't you already evaluated it in the past? Why hasn't the Parks Department already evaluated it in the past when they rightfully so technically own the property and the buildings?
In your lease, it states that when you rent the fields and the concession area.
Right,
And we are to do minor repairs. This season, I was made aware of leak, and I actually reported the leak in the women's room. That toilet kept flooding all season.
that was horrible.
I think Pete and Randall worked on that toilet a dozen times to get it to stop leaking. Anything that you guys reported to me, we addressed and fixed.
Okay, well.
When I say
it's-
evaluate the facilities, what I'm talking about is really going down there and taking a look at what do we need to buy. Are you guys going to take all the equipment out of the concession stand? What am I going to have to purchase that I will eventually move out to the new concession stand? But what do I need to plan for? So when I say evaluate, I don't mean, oh great, they're gone now I'm going to fix everything that was broken.
Right, that's not necessarily what I mean.
So if you guys have had-
I'm just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's
Asking
what
why,
I mean. You know, do are all the toilets working? Does the sink work? What equipment do we need? Do we need an ice machine? Do we need a soda refrigerator? You know, do we need a bigger fryer? That's what I mean when I say evaluate the facility. What do we want to paint? Do we want to buy some more paint? You know, things like that.
Okay, and that's why I said that was also not made clear, so that's why I was
Okay.
asking on that behalf. I just thought of something else I wanted to ask and it just totally spaced me. So, never mind. If I think of something else, we'll go from there. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Julie?
Good evening. J.R. Lunsford. I'm a former board member. My wife is former treasurer. I'm actually gonna go the other way. I would like to see the Parks Department take this over. As a former board member, there is almost no accountability with this Babe Ruth board. The finances are not properly kept, and I can speak to that because my wife was the former treasurer. There's protocols or SOPs or was it Robert's Rule of Order that the business meetings are not followed. There's illegal appointments that are made to friends and, you know, whatever. You talk about nepotism and you know, your friends and hiring your friends. I mean, that's the situation. It's an unfortunate situation, but that is the situation. So, you know, at least with the government, as much as I hate to admit that, you know, what Andy said, you know, when you can take away from the government, take it away. But I think in this instance, that you guys have a little better source of record keeping. There's checks and balances with you guys. The commissioner or whatever cannot just walk out and say, I'm gonna spend $5,000 on, you know, dirt. And the workers thing, it's always been a volunteer basis. I don't care. There's people that get upset down there. Well, if this person gets commissioner, I'm not gonna help, my kid's not gonna play, that's a lie. That's a lie. I've got 4 kids, 3 of which travel. Ann coached me when I was little. I coach her grandson. So, I mean, it happens. The kids that wanna play here are going to play here, and it doesn't matter who runs this thing. It does not matter. And anybody that tells you otherwise is lying. Plain and simple. If you can travel, if your kid's good enough to travel, they travel. If they don't, they come down the park or the ball field and they play with their friends because that's all they care about. Now, as far as the workers and the union, it's a bunch of smoke. If you can't do it, guess what? It's always been a volunteer organization. I'm not gonna not let my kid play ball because the union calls in sick. There's enough parents down here that will come and line the field like they have the last 50 years to do this. So if we're being honest, there's honesty. You guys have a budget, a set budget, they do not. When I brought this up at the meeting, I proposed for the last 2 years that we set budgets for the umpires, for the grounds crew, for the concessions, and it did not happen. Nor did it happen this past year. I can't speak to this year because I'm not on the board. So,
Jared provided us with basically a balance sheet.
for last year,
Yeah, for what, how,
2019.
2019, how the money was spent and,
okay.
and accountability, the accountability.
Because we voted on a budget.
Some of the things you're addressing, he has addressed with this.
Okay, well, as of June when I resigned, that was not in the meeting. And I was the secretary, so I kept the minutes of the meeting, and that was not, as of June of this year, that was not there. That
So
was not
that
in
was
place.
the end of the season
That
this
was the
year.
end of the season thing.
You resigned in March, just to remind you.
Whatever. Okay, I resigned in March.
What was your first name? again?
JR.
Thank you.
JR, I think that before you came in, we had a little discussion about, you know, people doing the things that they do best. And Michael, you weren't here when Michael spoke. And Michael talked about the baseball part of it and the
I was watching it.
the back part. And I think that it's obvious that the government entity can handle certain phases of it in a more effective manner than an independent board, simply because they have the structures in place to do it and to do it well. It's a mixed bag. It's absolutely a mixed bag with everybody.
And I don't disagree with that. I think the advisory board from some people here, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, I don't know if you guys know all the specs and exactly how to do that. I know Pete, you know, he plays ball, but there's a lot of expertise out here, and I will not deny that. But you can get that by saying, hey Jared, or hey Andy, we need a little bit of help. What I'm saying is the finances need to have finite control over what is spent and who is able to spend it. Not one person with a checkbook. So, any questions, clarification? I would just implore you guys to take this over.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I've been asked this too, is as a previous board member, to me, and I know I have a biased viewpoint because I think a certain way, what are the current volunteers losing in this situation? Because from the way I see it, they're still being given the opportunity to volunteer as they do now. So what is being taken away?
Decision-making abilities, absolute decision-making abilities. That's the problem.
Thank you, JR. Would anybody else like to speak?
I'm
Thank
speaker, but I'm going to anyway. Terry Davison, and I've officiated for the last 35 years. I've umpired all over the country. I've been to Las Vegas, California. I've umpired all over the country, seen the best teams in the country. My question is to you, how are you going to fund the officials, and where are you going to get your officials?
Sure. Well, that's going to be part of Dennis's role as the sports director, and he will work with the advisory board to find umpires. We have figured out how many games, how much we would pay a game, figured out how much we think we're going to need to spend on umpires, and that will be what we pay out of our registration and sponsorships.
So what's your feelings on how much you're going to pay?
We're thinking it'll be between $5,000 and $6,000 for the
I mean,
season.
per game, per official. 'Cause
I
you
don't
two
remember. Do
officials.
you remember all that? I don't have it written down in front of me.
$20 a game.
$20 a game.
You're not gonna get umpires for $20 a game. you're not gonna get people to do it.
It's recreational.
I know that.
That's the.
But you're not gonna get it done. I'm telling you.
I appreciate your opinion.
If I may, real quick, and I'm an official also, and you get what you pay for. Everybody right now is serving for officials. So right now, we have a really good group of officials down at Babe Ruth that umpire, and everybody that plays down there will attest to that. But when you start talking about lowering umpire wages, Brookville, they can't get umpires.
How much do you guys
Barely.
pay umpires
40 a game.
per game?
No. Minor B, it's lower,
Well, minor B is 15 a game, then the other ones is
30.
35 and 40 per umpire.
When you have
Well,
them call,
probably if you average all of that, we're pretty close with our budget. So if we need to up it for certain games and lower it for others, I mean, I think where we budgeted is pretty well in the middle of that, so.
It's like I said, you're not gonna give $20 a game. I'm just telling you that.
And I think that's a great example of advice that you could offer, so.
It's not gonna happen.
Thank you, Terry.
Hi. I'm Jamie Vaughn. I've been on the board since January or February of this year. I've been involved with lots of different boards in Connersville. Off and on, I work in finance, so I understand the ins and outs of the organization, and I'm sure, as all of you know, anywhere you go, you can find disgruntled people that aren't happy with what you're doing. But it's been pretty well general consensus that this Babe Ruth board has done a lot of good. We have moved the program forward. We have moved everything that needed to be addressed, I think, has been addressed. Everything that needed to change, I believe, is on the right path to change. I don't have any vested interest in Babe Ruth. I have 2 children. My son is a senior, never played baseball. My daughter plays fast pitch softball, has nothing to do with Babe Ruth. So, for me, I'm kind of an outsider, just wanting what's best for the youth of Fayette County. And I really just kind of I won't take the full 5 minutes unless you guys have questions, but I just kind of want to leave you guys with food for thought because I may or may not be the last speaker. Growing up in Connersville, I graduated from Connersville in 1997. I played softball here, I played rec league, I played high school. There's always been a real difference in the softball program and the baseball program, which is kind of sad. You know, there was a time in the 90s where we offered fast pitch for our girls, and that kind of failed. But the boys program has always been pretty strong. They've had their ups and downs. They've had issues with Babe Ruth. But the boys are learning to play what they're going to play in high school and what they need to succeed. And as long as you have the right people involved in that, it can be a great feeder program. Parks Department several years ago took over from the Boys and Girls Club, the softball program. And we're failing them. So I am really concerned about what's going to happen with the baseball program. I'm not saying that the Parks Department would fail the baseball program. I'm saying we're already failing in the softball program and what we can provide for our high school coaches to have for girls to play. So I don't hold a lot of faith that we would be able to provide what's needed for the boys should it transfer to the Parks Department, and after 5 or 10 years, let's look down the road, what's been the impact on the boys in the community. Babe Ruth really would like the opportunity, and we started that this year, working and trying to bring in fast pitch so that we can build a feeder program for the high school and really get the girls and boys on the same level and be able to provide great teams and great athletes for our high school. That's our goal. I know myself, and again, I don't have any kids in the sport, I spent over 100 hours down there working this summer. Working on the fields, cleaning up the flood, painting dugouts, getting that fast pitch field back into working condition because it had been let go for so long. So I'm just concerned, and I just want you guys to think about how the softball program is being run, and if the boys is taken over by the Parks, what's going to change, if anything, because I feel like we're failing in that area.
Jamie, I'm going to agree with you on the softball because both of my girls have played, and my younger daughter's 7 years down playing softball now. And I won't speak on the problems that we've had in the past. However, Dennis was hired just this year, and as we brought him on, I did meet with him and I told him exactly what I wanted to see from the softball program because I feel like it's not been a good feeder program and we need to be. And we don't have fast pitch, but you have certain issues that you have to work through as you add fast pitch. You can't go from slow to to fast overnight. So what we did this year was we added a transition. Was the 10U league. And so just beginning, because you have to change it slowly. You have to train the girls to pitch fast, but you also have to train the girls how to hit it when it's coming at them fast. Because if they're used to hitting it slow, then you throw a 40-mile-an-hour ball at them and they're jumping out of the way. So it's a matter of time before that really starts to build up. I would have loved for it to, have built faster, but you have to have the right people in place. We talked about offering camps. Just having the time to do that was the issue this year. Working with the high school softball coach, and so it's definitely something that I can tell you that the sports department is working on, but it's one of those things that it's a slow change, unfortunately.
And I don't think that, honestly, the younger that they started, the better off they are. And I don't think that the change would need to be, especially in the younger age groups, as slow as maybe you think, because a lot of those kids are going to Dublin and not playing in Fayette County or Brookville.
Right,
So they're already playing it because they've been drawn away from a community that's not offering what we need.
Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
It's not failing. The softball program is actually succeeding right now. We've got more girls playing, and that was due to one season of finally doing away with slow pitch and all the girls starting to adjust to hitting faster pitch ball. Like you said, the baseball has always been the same. They're being taught to play the game the same way they're going to play it when they get to Michael Thompson. That's where we failed in the past. Doesn't matter who's in the job, is we've had slow pitch. So we weren't playing the same softball game as they were in high school, and that's due to a lot of change. People did not want to change. Now we've changed it over and they're coming around. There's more and more starting to play fast pitch. We call it modified pitch due to everybody can't be a pitcher. You have to train them, but as long as you let them pitch, they're still pitching fast. It's just a matter of their form. But it's starting to become the same game that they play at the high school. And we've had more teams this year than we've had in the past.
I watched several of the games this year, and they're nowhere near the same game they'll see at the high school.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the same game. I'm saying it's got to get there. It can't be the same game instantly right now. It's going to take a little bit of time. And at this year alone, got a lot of girls playing fast pitch ball. They're hitting the ball anywhere between 40 and 50 mile an hour that they've never done before. It's not going to be overnight, but it is succeeding. It's building. And it also helps if the travel ball players, they need to continue playing in the leagues to help the leagues get along instead of choosing to only play travel ball because we're already past learning, but everybody else is still learning. So sometimes that's where the numbers are going, is they're choosing not to play in direct leagues. But it is getting better. It definitely is getting better.
In the baseball league, we have coaches pitch and then we have kids pitch, and I don't see softball being any different. We're not going to go to the baseball boys and say, we're going to teach you a modified pitch. We're not going to teach you that you can steal. We're going to, you're teaching them the game of baseball so they're prepared. And you can have all-star teams and you can have travel teams and they can be prepared for high school. So that's really all I ask. Whether it be through the Parks Department or under the current Babe Ruth Board, like I said, we've made a lot of progress. We want to continue to make progress, and we want what's best for the kids of Fayette County.
I'd just like to reiterate, since you brought up the strides that you've made, that we are not evaluating the current board. That is not what has been done.
No, the person who spoke before me was kind of talking about the issues with finances and things like that, and I've not seen any of that since I started, and it's been a general consensus how well this board has done. So I just wanted to bring that back to the forefront, because everybody knows how much has been done.
What I'm evaluating is the concept of a third party running a parks facility in general. And I think an advantage of the parks managing its own facility and its employees is like what you're saying. Well, maybe those comments and the feedback from softball parents needs to be written into the sports director's job expectation. And as the superintendent, that's something I can do. And then that is tied to a job evaluation. I don't know if you plan on sticking around for 15 years like Mr. Beckman has. The other problem that volunteer boards run into is that the people constantly change. Their kids grow up, they get burnt out, and they're done. This is my job. It's how I pay my mortgage, and I'm going to show up every day. I have job expectations. Dennis has job expectations. And if the parents are telling me as the superintendent that the softball program is failing, then my sports director's not going to get a good job evaluation. So I take your comments very seriously, and but I think those are all things that can be tied to job performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The difficulty with job performance with anybody is, and as a teacher I can relate to this, if you have poor job performance and you are dealing with children in any way as a coach, as a teacher, as a counselor, if you don't do your job well, the kids suffer. And that's the bottom line. So as adults, we have to keep that to an absolute minimum to help our kids. We're going to mess up. But the bottom line is we need to do what's in the best interest of our kids and creating a good environment for them. And it's not all about logic, and it's not all about money. Sometimes it's about putting a lot of those things aside and saying what's really going to be in the best interest of the kids of Fayette County.
And how do you specifically feel that the park is going to jeopardize the kids of Fayette County?
I don't think the park has any clue of what scope of what it takes to run Babe Ruth. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. The drafting that goes into it, the setting up of the schedules, the coaching, there is just so much that goes into it. It's not like signing up for a rec league for soccer or the other things that the kids do, because it's a lot more structured as far as expectations and the like. And Babe Ruth has provided that guidance over the years to do that. It's a matter of scope and being able to meet the needs of the kids. Financially, I'm on board. I understand that, the necessity for that. My fear is that you will lose some volunteers, and I hope we don't. But I think that's a real concern of mine, that we will lose some volunteers and our kids will lose as a result. Because you've taken, and whoever said it, you're taking some of the decision making away from them. You know, has Dennis ever run a draft for Babe Ruth? And I don't know, Dennis, have you ever?
Oh, for Babe Ruth?
No.
Yeah, I've run a draft, just not for the baseball yet.
Well, okay, but you've run a draft. The baseball draft's a little bit different. You've got how many groups of kids, minor A, minor B? There's an awful lot that goes into that. There's an awful lot of preparation that goes into this that I just have not seen the park fully understand, that how much time it takes before the season, how much time it takes to get this thing up and running before the first pitch is ever done. The tryouts, all of that stuff. It's an awful lot of time invested.
I would think,
Get-
go
I
ahead,
have-
go, let's go.
Jared, do all your volunteers always come back?
No, you have turnover.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's gonna be turnover every year, right? We're not saying that we don't want volunteers. Obviously, we're gonna need some people to volunteer, right? We're not saying, we don't, no, go away. No, absolutely not. We're gonna need people, and hopefully they'll volunteer. Some will, some won't.
And isn't this set up so that, yes, he's the sports director, but aren't we still utilizing a board, an advisory board to help run all that portion of it as
Yes,
well?
we are.
The people who are already involved with?
Who
Big
already
Rig
help
Tech?
run drafts and.
Okay. So it's not gonna fall on one person
No.
at this point?
No.
Okay.
Catherine?
I mentioned earlier that I didn't enter into this decision without research, and I'd like to just say that, you know, I've spoken 4 times, I believe, with the assistant regional commissioner, the state commissioner of the southern state of region. I've spoken with previous superintendents, previous board members of Babe Ruth. Other communities do this. They do it successfully. I would not have gotten this far if I did not have the confidence in my staff and in our ability to run leagues, to attract players, and to serve the community. So to say that we don't understand the scope, perhaps there will be things that come up, but I think that we have the track record. I think that we have the skill set to expand upon to make this successful.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else that would like to speak public? Okay. Thank all of you so much for coming tonight, for the questions, for the discussion, a lot of information. We will be voting on this in our regular meeting on Monday. Our meeting is at 7 p.m. and we'll meet right back here. So if nobody else has anything to add, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.